Hello and welcome to the Wright Know Your Money podcast. I'm Ashley Smith.
And I'm Tom Richards.
On the Know Your Money podcast, we talk everything finance, from financial planning tips to how what's going on in the world around you affects the money in your wallet and, most importantly, your financial future.
If this podcast helps you, please like and subscribe so that we can help as many people as possible moving forwards. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the pension annual allowance. Pensions are a great way of saving for your financial future in a tax-efficient manner. We've discussed pensions in previous podcasts and some of the benefits to investing in a pension, especially from a tax perspective. Due to the generous tax advantages available when investing in pensions, there are limits on the amount you can invest each year and receive tax relief on. As such, when making pension contributions, it's important to ensure you don't exceed the annual allowance. So, Ashley, over to you. Could you just quickly explain the annual allowance?
Yeah, so the annual allowance, quite simply, is a limit on how much an individual can pay into a pension each year and still receive tax relief. You can pay in more than your annual allowance, but you wouldn't receive any tax relief on those contributions.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Could you now just explain what counts towards the annual allowance?
Yeah, so the annual allowance effectively is a total of all of your contributions that you and your employer make, or any third party, to your pension. So the annual allowance for the 2022-23 tax year is £40,000 or 100% of earnings if earnings are lower, but this is increasing up to £60,000 for the 23-24 tax year. Point to note is if you earn less than £3,600 per year, you can actually still pay into your pension, and you can pay the £2,880 and you'll still get tax relief, which puts your pension contribution up to £3,600. The annual allowance as well is per person, not per pension. So if you've got more than one pension, unfortunately you can't put sort of from next tax year £60,000 into each of those pensions. It's a total amount. If you're making a pension contribution from your company or receiving a contribution from your employer, it can be more than your earnings. So I've just said here, if you're earning less than what will be £60,000, you would be capped at your earnings. Well, actually, if it's coming from your employer or if it's your own company, you can put more into the pension, still within your annual allowance cap of that £60,000, as long as the contribution is wholly and exclusively for the purpose of the business and for the work that you've done.
That's brilliant, thank you. I think another question I've got now is what happens if you exceed the annual allowance?
Okay, so the first thing to note here is that your money isn't going to be rejected by the pension provider.
Yeah.
Okay, it will still get paid into that pension. However, the tax relief on any amount over the annual allowance just doesn't receive the tax relief on it. Any excess contributions, effectively, when you fill your tax return in, get added to your gross income for that year, and your income tax bill is recalculated based on this new higher figure. Now, it's worth noting that if that tax charge is over £2,000, in some instances it is possible to get that deducted from the pension rather than you physically having to pay for that yourself. Unfortunately, not all pension providers will allow you to do that.
That's great, thank you. Another question I've got here from our listeners is, what if you haven't used all your annual allowance? Can you save it and use it in another year?
Yeah, so if you haven't used all of your annual allowance in the previous 3 years, you may actually be able to carry this forwards, as long as during those years you were a member of a pension scheme. Similar to the annual allowance in any individual year, however, you would need to have the income to support that carried over allowance. There are also some additional sort of conditions that do need to be taken into account. So when making the contribution, if it's over your annual allowance and you're using your carry forward, you need to use all of the current tax year's allowance first. Only then can you go back and use some of that unused allowance from previous years. After the current tax year has been exhausted, you then use the first year. So you sort of take it back one step at a time. You must have been a member of a UK registered pension scheme for the tax years that you wish to carry forwards from. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have actively been contributing to a pension. You just need to have been a member.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have an old pension scheme from a previous employer that you haven't paid into for many, many years, that still counts. You're still an active member of a pension. You could be subject to something called the tapered annual allowance, which I'll come on to in a moment. And if you are, that could impact your annual allowance and the amount that you can actually pay into the pension as well. So the tapered annual allowance then, for anybody that's got an income, an adjusted income over £260,000 for the 23-24 tax year, your annual allowance, that £60,000 you can pay into the pension, will reduce by £1 for every £2 that you're over that 260,000. This continues until you reach a minimum allowance of £10,000. So once your income is over 360,000, your annual allowance is capped at £10,000. Just to sort of note, your adjusted income, which I said is that you need to have an adjusted income below 260. It's simply a total of your income plus any pension contributions that you make in that year that aren't from your taxed income. So if you do salary exchange and your employer puts that into your pension, that gets added onto your adjusted income as well. There is another instance where you might find that your annual allowance is reduced, and it's for those that have previously accessed their pensions. Now, what I mean by this is not accessing just your tax-free cash. If you access just your tax-free cash, this doesn't count. It's for those that have accessed a contribution-based or a direct contribution-based pension or defined contribution pension in the form of drawdown. So it doesn't count if you've got an annuity, it doesn't count if you're a member of a defined benefit scheme or you've accessed your defined benefit scheme. Defined benefit scheme, as an example, is where similar to the NHS or the teacher scheme, where you get a defined income. I'm specifically talking here about drawdown, which is where you leave your pot invested and you draw an income off that investment. If you access any income, even if it's just £1 or £1, your annual allowance reduces down to £10,000 as well. Once you've accessed that as well and your annual allowance reduces to £10,000, there is no way to get that back up to the higher annual allowance. You will have a £10,000 annual allowance currently under current rules for as long as you live. How could we help then? So if you think you might be getting close to your annual allowance, or that it could be reduced because you've exceeded that £260,000 worth of income, it's worth considering getting advice from a regulated financial advisor like ourselves here at Howard Wright. We can help you understand how much your annual allowance is, including any unused allowances from previous years. Are you able to bring them forwards? If you have exceeded it, is there anything that you can do to bring that adjusted income back down so that your annual allowance isn't reduced? Best way to do this, as always, is to contact us via our website at www.howardwright.co.uk and fill in the inquiry form, or contact us on 0345 688 4939. Thank you for listening to the Howard Wright Know Your Money podcast. I've been Ashley Smith.
And I've been Tom Richards.
If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe or share on your socials. And if you're listening to us on Apple Music or Spotify, please follow and leave us a review.
It really helps other people find the podcast, enabling them to know their money better and build stronger financial futures. Please check out our Howard Wright link tree below for lots more tips, tricks, articles and podcasts just like this one.
And most importantly, stay tuned for future episodes. This recording contains information from sources believed to be reliable, but no guarantee, warranty or representation express or implied is given to its accuracy. Howard Wright does not undertake any obligation to update or revise any future statements. Past performance is not a reliable indicator of future results. Investments can go down as well as up, and actual results could differ materially from those anticipated. This recording is for the information purposes only and has no regard to the specific investment objectives or financial situation of any individual. The information contained in this recording is not intended to constitute and should not be construed as investment or financial advice. Appropriate personalised advice should always be taken before entering into any transactions. No responsibility can be accepted for any loss arising from action taken or refrain from being taken based on this publication. Howard Wright is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority.